The crossing Daniel Reeves hated thunderstorms. Not the distant, gentle kind that painted the horizon with silver light, but the violent ones that cracked open the sky and reminded him of things he'd rather forget. Today's storm had caught him 20 minutes into his evening run, far from his rented cabin outside Riverwood. Soaked and breathing hard, Daniel spotted the covered pedestrian walkway of Livingston Bridge ahead, an old wooden structure spanning the Ashton River. It wasn't ideal, but it would keep him dry until the worst passed. He jogged onto the weathered planks, shaking rainwater from his dark hair. The bridge swayed slightly beneath his feet, a relic from another time that somehow survived each spring flood. Thunder boomed overhead, making him flinch. 7 years since Afghanistan, and still the sound pulled him back to places he didn't want to go. Daniel had chosen Riverwood for its obscurity, a place where he could finish his novel without distractions, where nobody knew him as the former war correspondent who'd frozen on camera during his last broadcast. He'd come here to disappear. "Are you okay?" The voice startled him. A woman stood at the opposite end of the bridge, a canvas bag clutched to her chest. She wore a green dress, now speckled with rain, and looked at him with a mixture of concern and hesitation. "Fine," Daniel answered too abruptly. "Just waiting out the storm." She nodded, staying where she was. "Me too." "My car's on the other side." Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, olive skin, dark eyes, a small scar above her right eyebrow. She seemed to be in her early 30s, about his age. When thunder followed, she didn't flinch like he had. "I'm Sophia," she offered after a moment. "Sophia Alvarez." Daniel. He didn't give his last name. Old habits. The rain intensified, drumming against the bridge's roof. Awkward silence stretched between them, broken only by the storm. Daniel noticed Sophia was protecting her bag from the rain more than herself. "What's in there?" he asked, surprising himself. He rarely initiated conversation these days. Sophia hesitated. "Just some sketches. I was drawing by the river when the weather changed." She loosened her grip slightly. "I teach art at the elementary school." "You're not from here," Daniel observed. Her subtle accent suggested somewhere further south. "No," she smiled faintly. "Are you?" "Just passing through," he said, the lie coming easily. 6 months in Riverwood, and he still described himself as transient. Another crack of thunder, closer now. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, counting his breaths the way his therapist had taught him. When he opened them, Sophia had moved closer, though still keeping her distance. "I hate storms, too," she said quietly, misreading his reaction. "They remind me of hurricanes back home in Florida." Daniel nodded, grateful for the misunderstanding. "This one's moving fast, at least." Sophia smiled more genuinely this time. "The locals say Riverwood storms are like bad moods, intense but quick." "You've been here long?" "Almost 2 years." She glanced toward the road. "I came for a temporary position. Somehow stayed." Something in her tone suggested there was more to that story. Daniel found himself curious, an unfamiliar feeling lately. The rain began to ease, sunlight breaking through clouds downstream. Sophia shifted her weight, preparing to leave, and Daniel felt an unexpected reluctance to end the encounter. "Your sketches, are they of the river?" he asked. Sophia nodded. "The old Willow Bend. I'm working on a series for the town's bicentennial. I'd like to see it sometime." "The Willow Bend," he clarified quickly, "for my writing." He hadn't told anyone in Riverwood about his book. Why had he mentioned it now? Sophia studied him, surprised. "There's a farmer's market on Saturdays by the Riverside Park. I have a small booth there." She paused. "In case you're interested." The rain had stopped completely now. Sophia stepped away, raising a hand in farewell. "Stay dry, Daniel." He watched her cross to the other side, where an aged blue Volvo waited. As she drove away, Daniel realized he'd forgotten about the thunder completely. The bridge felt emptier now, the silence heavier. Daniel stared at the rushing water below, swollen with rain. For months, he'd avoided connections, conversations, anything that might anchor him too firmly to this temporary life. Yet as he finally continued his run, Daniel found himself thinking about Saturday's market, about sketches of willows, and about the way Sophia had said his name, like it belonged to someone worth knowing. Echoes and whispers. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn clarity, the kind of crystalline day that followed storms in Riverwood. Daniel stood at the edge of the farmer's market, watching locals navigate between stalls of produce, handcrafts, and baked goods. He'd nearly talked himself out of coming 3 times that morning. Sophia's booth sat beneath a maple tree at the far corner, canvas stretched on wooden frames creating a makeshift gallery. She wore her hair pulled back today, revealing delicate silver earrings that caught the light when she moved. Daniel watched her explain something to an elderly couple, her hands animated, before he approached. "You came," she said, surprise coloring her voice when she noticed him. "I was curious about the willows," Daniel replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. He gestured to her displays. "These are yours?" Sophia nodded, stepping aside to show him. Her sketches captured the river in various moods, morning mist rising from still waters, afternoon light dappling through leaves, the torrent after rainfall. One drawing in particular caught his attention, the old willow with its branches sweeping the water, rendered in charcoals with such precision it seemed to move. "You've caught something here," Daniel said quietly. "The feeling of the place." Sophia studied him. "Writers notice these things, I suppose?" "Former journalist," he admitted reluctantly. "Working on fiction now." "What kind?" Daniel hesitated. A man trying to outrun his memories. He'd never summarized his work so plainly before, not even to himself. Sophia nodded, seeming to understand more than he'd said. "Would you like some tea? My neighbor brings me a thermos every market day." They sat on wooden crates behind her booth, sipping jasmine tea from paper cups while customers browsed occasionally. Daniel learned Sophia had grown up in Miami, the daughter of Cuban immigrants who'd valued education above all else. "They wanted me to be a doctor or lawyer," she explained. "Art teacher was a compromise." "Do you regret it?" Daniel asked. Sophia considered this. "Sometimes I wonder about the roads not taken. But no, I don't think so." She paused, studying him. "What about you? Do you miss journalism?" "I miss who I was then," he answered honestly. "Believing I could make a difference by telling stories." "What happened?" The question was direct, but her tone held no demand. Daniel found himself telling her about his years covering conflicts across the world, the gradually accumulating weight of witnessed suffering, and finally, the panic attack that had struck during a live broadcast from a refugee camp. He omitted the nightmares, the diagnosis, the pills he'd stopped taking months ago. "So now I write fiction where I control the endings," he finished, attempting lightness. Sophia's gaze was steady. "Is that working?" Before he could answer, a young girl approached, asking about art lessons. As Sophia spoke with her mother, Daniel studied a smaller sketch half hidden behind the others. A hurricane-damaged house, palm trees bent sideways by wind. Something personal there, he sensed. When the customers left, Sophia surprised him by asking, "Would you like to see the willow bend in person?" "I'm packing up soon." An hour later, they walked a narrow path along the river. The massive willow came into view around a bend, its trailing branches creating a secluded alcove beside the water. Without speaking, Sophia settled on a flat rock and opened her sketchbook. Daniel sat nearby, notebook in hand, but found himself watching her work instead, the focused furrow between her brows, the sure strokes of her pencil. "Tell me about your hurricane," he said suddenly. Sophia's hand paused. She didn't look up. "You saw the drawing?" "Yes," she continued sketching. "Hurricane Elena, 3 years ago. My parents' home, my childhood home, was destroyed." Her pencil moved steadily across the paper. "They refused to evacuate. My father was stubborn that way." Daniel waited. "Some stories needed space to emerge. They didn't make it," Sophia finally said. "I'd been begging them to move inland for years, but they loved that house, that view of the ocean." Her voice remained steady, but her fingers tightened around her pencil. "I was in Orlando at a teaching conference when it happened." "That's why you stayed here," Daniel realized. "As far from hurricanes as possible." Sophia nodded. "I couldn't face the ocean anymore." She looked up finally, meeting his gaze. "We all have our storms we're running from, I suppose." As the afternoon light filtered through willow branches, casting dappled shadows across Sophia's face. Daniel felt something shift between them. Recognition, perhaps. Two people who understood absence, who carried empty spaces shaped like people they'd loved. When they walked back to town as sunset painted the river copper, their silence felt different. Not the awkward pause of strangers, but the comfortable quiet of shared understanding. "I'm at the farmer's market every Saturday," Sophia said when they reached her car. "I'm writing at Riverside Cafe most mornings," Daniel replied. "The invitation clear. The next Wednesday?" Sophia appeared at the cafe, sketchbook in hand. She sat at a table across from his without explanation, ordered tea, and began to draw. Daniel found himself writing more freely than he had in months, glancing up occasionally to find her gaze on him, thoughtful and warm. It became their unspoken routine, shared spaces, parallel creative work, conversations that gradually excavated their pasts and present. Neither spoke of the future. Neither acknowledged the current that seemed to pull them slowly, inevitably, toward each other. Part 3. The Weight of Water. The first frost of October arrived overnight, silvering the landscape when Daniel met Sophia for their now customary Sunday morning walk. 3 weeks had passed since the thunderstorm at the bridge, weeks of gradual revelations and careful circling. They'd established unspoken boundaries, meeting in public places, maintaining a certain physical distance, avoiding topics too raw or recent. Today, Sophia carried a thermos of coffee and a paper bag of cinnamon rolls from the town bakery. "For sustenance," she explained as they set off toward the river trail. "I thought we might go further today." Daniel followed her lead, noticing how she'd layered against the cold. Burgundy scarf wound around her neck, fingerless gloves revealing her artist's calluses. He'd begun to catalog these details about her, storing them away like treasures. "I finished a chapter last night," he told her as they walked. "The first one I haven't immediately wanted to delete in months," Sophia smiled. "Progress. It helps having someone who—" Daniel hesitated. "Who expects me to show up somewhere." "Accountability partner," she suggested lightly, though something in her expression hinted at understanding the weight of his admission. They reached the Willow Bend and continued past it, following the river as it curved through increasingly wild terrain. Eventually, Sophia veered off the main path, ducking between trees along what appeared to be a game trail. "Where are we going?" Daniel asked. "Somewhere I found my first month here," she answered. "Not many people know about it." The trail ended at a small clearing overlooking a bend in the river where the water formed a perfect horseshoe. In the center stood an enormous flat-topped boulder, large enough for several people to sit comfortably. "Local teenagers call it Wishing Rock," Sophia explained as they picked their way down to it. "There's a legend about lovers making promises here that the river keeps." Daniel helped her up onto the sun-warmed surface. They sat side by side, legs dangling over the edge, and shared coffee from the thermos cap. Below them, the river flowed in its eternal circuit, birds skimming its surface for insects. "Sometimes I come here when the noise in my head gets too loud," Sophia said after a while. "The water helps somehow," Daniel nodded. "Water holds memory. At least that's what my grandmother believed." "Your nightmares," Sophia said suddenly. "They're about the war, aren't they?" "Not just the stories you covered." Daniel stared at the river. He hadn't told her about his military service before journalism, about the things he'd seen and done. "How did you know?" "The way you react to certain sounds. How you always position yourself to see exits." She paused. "I had a student whose father was the same way after he came back." Daniel felt something crumble inside him, walls he'd carefully maintained. 2 tours in Afghanistan. "Things happen that his voice caught, "that I can't undo." Sophia didn't speak, just moved her hand until it rested beside his, their little fingers touching. That small point of contact anchored him. "I thought journalism would help, telling stories that mattered, making people see the humanity in places they only associated with conflict. For a while it did." He took a breath. "Then I started having flashbacks during broadcasts. The last one was on live TV. My editor called it a health hiatus, but we both knew I was finished. Is that when you started the novel? Sophia asked quietly, about 6 months later, after the medications and therapy sessions and failed attempts to go back. Daniel hadn't spoken these truths aloud to anyone. The book is about a war photographer who accidentally captures something he shouldn't have, and the choice he makes afterward. It's you. But not you? Sophia observed. Fiction lets me rewrite the parts I can't face. Daniel looked at her then. What about you? Do you put yourself in your art? Sophia was silent for a long moment. My parents' death wasn't the only reason I left Florida. She pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. I was engaged to a musician, Marco, talented, charismatic, increasingly possessive. Daniel waited as she gathered her thoughts. The hurricane was the breaking point. After the funeral, he expected me to move in with him, to let him take care of me. When I said I needed space, needed to grieve, she shook her head. He couldn't accept it. Started showing up at my workplace, monitoring my calls, telling friends I was unstable with grief. You ran, Daniel said softly. I left everything except what fit in my car. Drove until I saw the posting for Riverwood Elementary. Sophia's voice steadied. The first year I jumped at every knock on my door. Changed my phone number twice. Has he found you? No. But I still check over my shoulder sometimes. As if by mutual agreement, they sat in silence afterward, watching the river flow beneath them, carrying leaves downstream. Their confessions hung in the air between them, changing something fundamental. They were no longer just two creative people enjoying each other's company. They were survivors recognizing each other's scars. When they finally rose to leave, Daniel offered his hand to help Sophia down from the rock. She took it, and neither let go as they walked back toward town, fingers intertwined, the weight between them somehow lighter for having been shared. Breaking Currents November brought early snow to Riverwood, transforming the landscape overnight. Daniel woke to find his cabin surrounded by pristine white, the river a dark ribbon cutting through the brightness. His phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. Snow day declared. No school. Meet at the cafe? An hour later, they claimed their usual corner table at Riverside Cafe. Sophia had brought her watercolors instead of charcoal, inspired by the winter palette outside. Daniel noticed something different about her today. A lightness, perhaps, since their conversation at Wishing Rock 2 weeks before. I have news, she said, sliding a flyer across the table. The Harmon Gallery in Burlington wants to feature my river series in their spring exhibition. Sophia, that's incredible, Daniel said, genuine pride warming his voice. He'd watched her work for months now, had seen the care she poured into each piece. Your first solo show? She nodded, a mix of excitement and apprehension crossing her features. I never thought, Riverwood is hardly an arts destination. The gallery owner happened to be visiting her sister here and saw my booth at the market. It's well-deserved, Daniel insisted. When is it? April. Sophia hesitated. Would you come? To the opening? The question hung between them. April was 5 months away, longer than Daniel had stayed anywhere since leaving journalism. The invitation acknowledged a future neither had dared discuss. I'd like that, he said simply. Though his heart raced at the commitment, Sophia smiled, reaching across to squeeze his hand briefly before returning to her painting. Daniel opened his laptop but found himself watching her instead, the precise movements of her brush, the slight furrow of concentration between her brows, the strand of dark hair that had escaped her ponytail. These past weeks, their careful boundaries had begun to blur. Movie nights at Sophia's small apartment above the bookstore. Dinners at Daniel's cabin, his arm around her shoulders during walks when the wind cut sharp, her head resting against him as they watched flames dance in his fireplace. Each touch a question, a possibility neither had fully acknowledged. I sent 3 chapters to my agent yesterday, Daniel said suddenly. Sophia looked up, surprise and pleasure illuminating her face. You didn't tell me. I wanted to wait until I'd actually done it. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit. It's the first work I've submitted in almost 2 years. What did she say? Haven't heard back yet. Daniel closed his laptop. But it felt good finishing something. Having someone read words I'm not ashamed of. Sophia studied him. Your writing has changed these past months. How would you know? He asked, smiling. I haven't let you read it. Your voice changes when you talk about it. Before, you sounded like you were describing a burden. Now there's... She tilted her head, searching for the right word. Anticipation. Daniel considered this. I've been writing about healing, about finding unexpected connections. His eyes met hers. About the courage it takes to stay somewhere with someone. Sophia's breath caught visibly. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken implications. The cafe door swung open with a gust of cold air, breaking the spell. Daniel glanced toward the entrance, then froze. A man stood stamping snow from his boots, tall with a musician's lean build and carefully styled hair. He surveyed the cafe with the confidence of someone used to being noticed. When his gaze landed on Sophia, recognition flashed across his face. Sophia? The name carried across the cafe, his voice carrying a hint of the same accent as hers. Daniel watched the color drain from Sophia's face, her fingers tightening around her paintbrush until her knuckles whitened. Marco, she whispered, the name like glass in her mouth. The man approached their table, all charm and smiles. I can't believe it. All this time, he looked at Daniel with barely concealed assessment. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? Daniel stood, positioning himself slightly between them, responding to the fear radiating from Sophia. Daniel Reeves, he said, not offering his hand. Marco Vega. He smiled, revealing perfect teeth. Sophia's fiancé? Ex-fiancé, Sophia said, finding her voice. What are you doing here, Marco? Your mother's sister finally told me where you were. Marco pulled out a chair uninvited, sitting down. I've been looking for you for 2 years, Sophia. You disappeared, no goodbye, no explanation. Do you know what that did to me? To everyone who cared about you? Sophia's hands trembled. I told you I needed space. Space, yes. Vanishing without a word? Leaving me to explain to everyone why the woman I loved abandoned me? Marco's voice remained even, reasonable, though something cold lurked beneath. Daniel recognized the manipulation, had seen similar tactics in conflict zones, the aggressor recasting themselves as victim. He caught Sophia's eye, silently asking what she wanted him to do. I think you should leave, Sophia said to Marco, her voice steadier than her hands. Marco ignored her, turning to Daniel. She does this, runs when things get difficult. Did she tell you she left 3 days before our wedding, after I'd spent months helping her through her grief? You weren't helping me, Sophia said quietly. You were controlling me. Marco's charming facade slipped momentarily. I protected you. I gave you everything. I didn't ask for any of it. Sophia began gathering her painting supplies. Please leave, Marco. Not until we talk properly. Marco reached for her wrist. I came all this way. Daniel moved then, his hand catching Marco's before it reached Sophia. She asked you to leave. Something dangerous flashed in Marco's eyes. This isn't your business. It became my business when you put your hands on her, Daniel replied, his voice low. The cafe had grown quiet, other patrons watching with concern. The owner, Mrs. Fitzgerald, approached their table. Everything all right here? Fine, Marco said smoothly, withdrawing his hand. Just a misunderstanding. He stood, adjusting his coat. I'm staying at the Riverwood Inn. I'll be here a few days, Sophia. We need to talk, properly, privately. His gaze flicked to Daniel. About our future. After he left, Sophia sat motionless, her breathing shallow. Daniel returned to his seat, fighting the urge to go after Marco. How did he find me? She whispered. I was so careful. Daniel reached across the table, covering her cold hands with his. What do you need? Sophia looked up, tears threatening but held back by determination. I can't stay at my apartment. He'll come there. My cabin, Daniel said immediately. You can stay as long as you need. That evening, as snow fell outside the cabin windows, Sophia paced the living room while Daniel built a fire. They'd stopped briefly at her apartment to collect essentials, both acutely aware that Marco might be watching. I should have changed my name, Sophia said. Cut ties with everyone from before. You shouldn't have to erase yourself to be safe, Daniel replied, straightening from the fireplace. What can I do? Sophia paused her pacing, looking at him with sudden clarity. You've been in actual war zones. This must seem so melodramatic to you. Daniel crossed to her, gently placing his hands on her shoulders. Danger is danger. Fear is fear. Your experience isn't less valid because mine was different. Something broke in Sophia then. The careful composure she'd maintained since seeing Marco, she leaned forward until her forehead rested against Daniel's chest. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling her silent tears dampen his shirt. I thought I was free, she whispered. I thought I'd finally built a life he couldn't touch. Daniel held her tighter. You have, he said firmly, and we'll protect it.